Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson. Matthew Dickerson. Tech Talk. Tech Talk. Sit back and relax. It's time to talk technology.
Hello, Masters of the Universe. I am He-Man and I have the power. The power, ladies and gentlemen, to welcome you to Castle Grayskull for yet another Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson. And here to unlock all the secrets of the universe, 9 at a time, is the Grand Master of the Universe himself, Mr. Matthew Dickerson. Welcome back to Eternia, Matt.
Are we putting our weights up just a little bit too much there?
No, we're there.
Okay, right. If you're with it, I'm with it. I'm there.
We're punching with the big boys.
All over it. That's good. So speaking of punching with the big boys, I saw a funny little incident this week where it was actually my daughter who's at uni and just works some casual hours at a fashion retail outlet. I won't mention any brand names here, of course. And she just said over the last 3 or 4 days, there have been a few people coming in wanting to try on just a few particular lines of some of the new items that are coming out. Now, these are new winter items, the latest and greatest, all very expensive, of course. And she's thinking, well, this is great. This is obviously really popular for the particular company she works for. But none of them were buying it after they tried it on. And so she kept asking, obviously probably chasing a few sales there. Yeah. And finally one of them said, I've just come in to get the right size because I got this fantastic deal online, 70% off. And my daughter said, well, 70% off for the latest fashion. I'm sure if they're out of season, you might get some good discounts.
Yeah,
but
it's rare to have a sale going into the season.
Correct.
And on your top line new stuff.
So she said to one of these customers, can you show me the site? And so she pulls out a phone and has a look, and my daughter looks at it and said, it does look right, but, wait up, see the domain name there? It's just got one letter different in the domain name. So unless you're really trying to pick it up,
savvy.
You'd say that looked like it. And she actually pulled up the proper site on her phone and had it beside this customer's phone, side by side, and they looked identical.
Wow.
But again, just
except
some small
for the
things.
70%
Exactly
sale.
right.
Yeah.
And you can imagine you'd pay that amount, the 30% price that you'd normally pay, and you'd be waiting for this latest fashion to turn up in the post, and of course it would never turn up and you'd never see your money again. But then as people came in to try some of these clothes on, she started asking, and it was amazing how many people were coming in because they'd seen this, well, they didn't know it was a scam, but this scam that was being put out there. So the company that was doing it had done a really good job in getting into the inboxes or getting it in front of lots of people. So well done to them. Your marketing is really working quite well.
But well done to your daughter for picking it up, and she deserves a pay rise.
Well, that's exactly right. I said, so all these people that came in to try it on and then realised they'd been scammed, did they actually end up buying them? She said, no, they were too dear then. So they wanted the 30% price rather than the full price of it. Yeah. But that's how easy it can be. You see something, gee, that looks like a good special. I'll go and just try that on and make sure it's right. Now, some people wouldn't try it on. Some people would just go, I know my size, I'll order it there and say goodbye to your money. Yeah. So we haven't talked a lot about scams lately. Maybe we're slowly getting on top of them in different ways. I'm not convinced of that, but maybe we're having some success. But that one there, in terms of on the ground, just a real incident where you're just seeing the impact of that, there's a perfect example of exactly what happens still.
Absolutely. It's a world of scams.
Except this one.
Except for this.
This is real. We're real.
This is all legit. Yeah, we're certified. Okay, folks, if you're on the land and listening to us from inside a tractor today, this first story may be familiar to you. For a couple of decades now, GPS has been an important feature in crop farming, and most of it, if not all, in modern tractors that is, and header models, they all come with the technology as standard. This makes sowing and harvesting much, much easier and more precise from what I gather, as an ignorant townie that is. So if you were out on the back paddock sowing your winter crops recently and you noticed that you were wandering inexplicably all over the place because your GPS went bung, don't worry, it wasn't a problem with your hardware. The problem was far, far away, well out of your zone of control at least, about 20,000 kilometres above your head. Matt, I hope people didn't wreck their dashboards trying to fix this thing with tie wire and duct tape.
All sorts of things I'm sure they tried. I actually heard about this before I picked up the story. I heard about this from a farmer that I know, and I just said, how was your day today? What did you get up to? He said, well, actually, it was a really frustrating day because he went out to start sowing first thing in the morning, and exactly as you said, he's turned on his tractor, turned on his GPS, and hit the button a few times and hits the screen, and it doesn't work, and he's playing around with it. He just couldn't get the damn thing to work on his tractor. So, of course, he rang the dealer to get someone to come out and service it and get it sorted. And he sat on hold for ages thinking, what's going on with the dealer? Usually they're pretty good. They pick up pretty quickly. But, of course, every other farmer had rung.
Yeah, of course.
And they were doing the same thing because it wasn't a problem with any of the systems on the tractors themselves. It was a problem with the Inmarsat I4F1 satellite system, which is a British satellite system. Most of these farming companies, we're talking about big names here, we're talking about John Deere, Case, Ag Leader, Trimble, so there's some pretty big names there. They're using this particular satellite system. So it wasn't the farmers, it wasn't the tractors, it was the whole satellite system. Now you think, well, big deal, you haven't got the GPS on your tractor.
Do it the old-fashioned way.
Exactly
Just
right.
watch where you're going.
But what this particular farmer that first talked to me about explained to me was that they've gotten to the point now where their rigs are so wide that it's not just an easy little keep an eye on the rearview mirror or just look over your shoulder and see where it's up to. They're so wide to try and cover more ground and make them more efficient.
Yeah.
It's pretty hard to pick exactly where the edge of the actual sowing is.
Oh, right.
Then when you get down, so it's all auto steer. So
Yeah.
some of these farmers have been using auto steer for 15, 20 years.
Yeah, that's right. And you sit on your in your chair there, and you're effectively just watching it all happen around you.
Well, no, you're watching your iPad and watching
Sorry.
some movie.
Okay, yeah, you got YouTube running.
That's right. And then you get to the end of a row, and typically then you spin around. But even this farmer explained that the rig's so wide that you can't even do 180s at the end of each row. So you've got a bit of an idea of the edge of the row. This particular rig that he was driving can only do 90-degree turns, and so you basically do a circumference around your paddock rather than go up and down.
Okay.
So you can imagine when you get back around to where you just were a minute ago and, where's the edge of that again? So then, of course, you might double sow. If you were sowing a crop, you might double sow, so you get a little
That's
strip.
costly.
That's costly, and you get double bits of whatever crop you're sowing that growing there. Or you might have a gap, which means you don't get an efficient or as efficient a production out of your
It's
particular.
costly again.
Exactly right. So basically, they park the tractors for a day or two until they fix the problem and then got it up and going. Marine safety was also affected, but not things like EPIRB. So if you had an emergency, that would still work. But if you were using some marine devices, some marine safety devices maybe to find where you were about to go.
We didn't get a whole lot of boats lost at sea, did we?
Well, we didn't, but I think people just stayed.
Navigating by the stars. Quite
No,
good.
I think they just stayed on shore. I think
Okay, all right.
I think they looked at their. I don't know where I'm going. I haven't got that. But what I started to think about was imagine if it did affect GPS systems on phones and in cars in somewhere like a Sydney or a Melbourne or an LA or a New York.
Yeah, so if you could have a failure on that count,
Wow.
you could have a failure on any count, couldn't you?
You're right, and you can imagine what would happen, the complete traffic chaos you would have if suddenly no one could work out where they were going. Now,
I wouldn't
very
be able to
few
find my way to your place.
That's right. Very few people now can actually just satellite can actually navigate without using some form of GPS system. So you might have the familiar way you go to work, but you're still relying on, is there a bit of congestion there? I'll just take a different route today because I can see on my GPS system some different coloured lines, so there must be congestion there. I'll take a different route. But imagine if you couldn't do that.
Yeah.
Taxi drivers rely on it, although most of those are pretty good, but so many people rely on their GPS systems. You would have absolute traffic chaos. You'd have people just say, I can't come into work today, boss, because I've got no GPS. That's it. I'm stuck. So it would be quite interesting. But this one didn't affect any of those systems. But if this one could go down, then what's to stop other systems going down as well? So interesting. And again, I haven't been able to find out what the exact problem was. Was it some sort of bad player, bad actor who was basically going and deliberately targeting this? Was it just someone who forgot to pay the bill and whoops, we haven't got power over there in that particular land system there? I don't know what actually occurred. It took it probably over a day to get back up and running again. Some systems were up and going a bit shorter than that. And there were some free satellites you could change your farming systems over to. Some farmers did that, but it wasn't as accurate. So you kind of decided, do I just wait until the prop one's up and running again, or do I try and do that one? So, we've come a long way. And in terms of technology, we rely on it so much, don't we?
We do, don't we? Technology has become the backbone of everything we do. For those people in aged care, which is an enormous and growing sector in 2023, technology has stepped up the game with a device to help maintain an elderly person's independence while still offering the security of having immediate support in the unfortunate case of a fall. This tech is a big deal, folks. Previous options have been either invasive on people's privacy or subject to failure from forgetfulness. Matt, how is this new tech going to work?
And I think you're right there, just to go back a step there. I think you're right. Some people have their emergency buttons they have to push if something goes wrong. But if they do fall over, pass out, have some reason that they're incapacitated, then they can't just push a little button, for example. Watches, I know a lot of people do get watches for their grandparents, for example, so that they do fall over and they're still for a certain period of time or their heart rate changes. But most watches you've got to charge every couple of days. So people go around, hey, Granny, how you going with that watch I got you? Oh, yeah, this thing on my wrist, it doesn't work anymore. Look, it's all quiet. It's all black. It's what's going on. You've got to charge it each day or every couple of days. Oh, what? That's just crazy.
Yeah.
So that doesn't always work so well. And then you have to be in range of some of the other various ones out there. Now, a telco in the US and Cherish Health have gotten together to try and work out, firstly, some commercial solutions around aged care facilities, but it will also get into the homes, and I'll get into that a bit more in a moment. So what they do with this particular system is they use a radar device that's something like you see in the movies when you'll see someone about to go and make a raid on a building and you see the little warm dots moving around the household.
People inside the house through the walls, right? Yeah,
correct,
okay.
yeah. So you'll see these warm dots, so they're about to go and make a raid and they go, oh, we know we've got 2 bogeys over there and 1 over here. I'm not sure if that's the right term, but it sounds impressive.
Yeah.
So it's similar to that, where they're using radar technology in an aged care facility to go out around surrounding rooms, so you don't even need a device in each and every room. It can cover a number of rooms from a central spot. And then once that detects something where someone might have fallen over, they know where the beds are. So if they're laying down in their bed, that's probably okay. They're having a nap. But if they're laying down on their kitchen floor, maybe that's not so good. So then an alert goes off. So in the aged care facility, an alert could go, one of the staff members could then rush to that particular room and then see what the particular problem is. So that all sounds fantastic. But in an aged care facility, you are getting checked on fairly regularly anyway. Some people like their grandparents, for example, being in an aged care facility because you do have some more regular checks. Some people want to stay in their homes though, and that becomes a bit more problematic. But the second iteration of these, I believe, it's not there yet and they haven't announced this yet, but I believe absolutely once they've got it where it's working in an aged care facility, in a home, makes a lot of sense. So if I'm someone who wants to stay in my home and I want to get old and grey in my home and have familiar surroundings, my grandkids put one of these in my house. It monitors my house. The same thing. If I fall over, if I'm still for too long, an alert can go off. And the reason telcos are interested in this is because they'll have SIM cards in the devices so they can communicate with the outside world, even if you haven't got Wi-Fi or if your internet's down, for example, and then send a message out to the outside world and say something's wrong out here. So we are working so much on different health devices, and we often talk about wearables in health. This isn't a wearable, but this is something where it really is trying to keep us in a more comfortable way, which declare a conflict of interest here, James. As we get older and older, this will be fantastic. We want more and more of these health devices to look after us in our old age.
Yeah, well, the other issue is that cameras are so invasive as well. So to have cameras all around the house watching you 24/7, people need privacy.
Yeah, so this is the idea of this. This would be able to see a warm blob moving around, but it wouldn't know whether the warm blob had clothes on, for example. Yeah. So in terms of that privacy, it's not really an invasion of privacy. You might see that Granddad spent 20 minutes on the toilet doing the crossword, but it's probably not as bad as having a camera in the toilet watching him do the crossword.
Yeah. When you're providing an internationally recognised prize for something, you'd hope the recipient was being considered extremely carefully, and the processes are thorough and the award will be received with esteem and without contention. Yeah, right. The winner of this year's Sony World Photography Creative Open Category Award has handed it straight back to the donors, and for good reason, Matt.
He was very creative, I must admit. And this is a major award, the Sony World Photography Awards. If you're a photographer and if you can get into these as a finalist, as a place getter, for example, that's a big deal. This could launch your entire photographic career. So a German artist by the name of Boris L. Dagson, I apologise if that's not quite the right pronunciation, but he did win, as you said, the Creative Open category, and he didn't say anything about it. In fact, the judges were a little bit annoyed because they said he misled them on his application because you've got to declare it's your own work and you took the photos, etc., etc. So he ticked all those boxes to make all those declarations. But as it turned out, and he fessed up at the end, once he won the award, he got first place. So again, well done.
Yeah.
But then he said, actually, I didn't take a photo.
So is he out there to prove a point, though?
Exactly right. That's exactly what he was trying to do. Now, when I looked at the photo, it looked very impressive. It was a period photo. So you might have, for example, had two models that dressed up in period gear from back around the 40s.
Yeah,
and
it looked
50s.
around the 30s and 40s, I thought.
That, yeah. So if you took the photo, you've got a lot of trouble to get people dressed up, put them in a studio, do some soft focus on there, get them in the right pose and do all that. That's a lot of work to do all that. And you've got to be creative and think about all that, as opposed to AI, where you feed into a system and say, just give me a photo of two people from the 30s and 40s. And, oh, there you go, done. My work is done here. So it was to prove a point that if the judges in the Sony World Photography Award, who are esteemed judges, these aren't just Billy on the corner who looked at a picture and went, oh, that looks like a photo to me. If these judges can be tricked, fooled is probably too strong a word, into thinking that this was a photograph, then that was exactly Boris's point. Well, why do we need cameras anymore? Why do we need photos anymore? Let's just go and use AI to create everything. Now, AI is not going to create a photo of my little Johnny running around at the athletics carnival and winning fourth place in a 100-metre dash or something. But photos for creative works, then, there's a lot of work to go through that creative process as opposed to using AI. So the judges weren't very happy in the end. I still think he did the right thing in terms of putting his hand up.
Yeah, absolutely did. Yeah.
By the way.
But, outside of proving the point, people at Sony, they've invested a lot in this and integrity's everything. So, to have then been shown up to that, I can understand why they'd be a bit annoyed. Yeah,
that's right. And I use a bit of AI when I'm posting things on social media. I do use a bit of AI to generate that. And it's not perfect, but it's something to illustrate a point. And the worst ones I find are with people. So this particular AI was pretty good because sometimes I'll get it to produce a person and it looks like a person with 6 fingers or a person with a face that looks like their nose is off to the side of their face and all sorts of things. So it's not perfect at producing people, but when you just want to produce inanimate objects or strange inanimate objects, a kitty cat as an astronaut, for example, stuff like that, it does it very well. And again, you think about all the work you'd have to do to dress up a cat in an astronaut outfit as opposed to type in one line and wait 10 seconds. It's a bit easier with AI.
Well, I guess the other thing is too, he's opened a can of worms in that, okay, so he was honest. What about the next guy that comes along?
Good point. So
and it just year after year.
All these AI experts out there now going, great, I can pick up a whole bunch of photography awards and have to do no work for it at all.
The Polestar 4 EV model is fresh out of its Swedish garage and it's had its launch recently. And it's setting new trends in automotive design, folks. Matt, from what I gather, rear windows are very, very much 2022.
Absolutely right. Now, I know this is going to bring up one of your favourite memories that you've talked about from time to time, and that's the Homer. The car that Homer Simpson was allowed to design. That's right. And it goes back, I actually went and looked it up, episode 28 of The Simpsons. So it's one of the very early episodes back in February 1991 was that particular episode, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, if you want to go and look it up. And, of course, his long-lost half-brother. Runs a Detroit car manufacturer. It shows how old it is, running Detroit car manufacturing. And, of course, he says, design a car with a blank sheet of paper, and he comes up with a monstrosity and the company goes broke and his brother never talks to him again. Typical Simpsons. But I started thinking about it, and I think to a certain extent what Polestar has done with this one, and we'll get onto the Polestar a bit more in a minute, but what Polestar has done with this one is really what I think EV manufacturers are starting to do. They've been given a blank sheet of paper like Homer Simpson, but maybe with someone with a few more skills than Homer, and they've been told to design a car where you don't need an engine bay, you don't need a petrol tank, you don't need, maybe a steering wheel as we go forward. So you've got all these different things. Now, if you think about the motor car, Carl Benz patented that back in 1886. So we've had a long time to refine that internal combustion model. But then you say to a modern designer, don't worry about an engine bay. You don't need to have somewhere where a hot device that's creating all this noise and heat and toxic fumes is going to have to be. You don't have to get those toxic fumes from that point to somewhere out the back where you want to get rid of them through an exhaust system. You don't need a drive shaft tunnel through the middle of the car where the drive shaft takes the power from the front to the back. In fact, the transmission, where you would often have the gear stick sitting above the transmission in the centre console, well, you don't need the transmission anymore. So there's all these things that you don't need. Now, one of the things, and I suppose it's not specific to EVs, but with the Polestar, they said, why do we need a rear window? Well, we've got to see what's behind you. Well, our cameras are good enough now and our screens are big enough that why don't we just do that? And I had a Tesla Model S for a while, and in that particular car, it had a rear window still, but it had a rear camera, and you could turn that on so that you could actually see on the big screen in the middle what was happening out the back. And so I found myself using that view more often when I had it on the full view of the screen. And in the Model S, it's got got a landscape screen rather than portrait like the Model Y has. So I would actually find myself looking in that screen rather than looking at the back window because it gave me a better view. So that's exactly what Polestar have done. Now, other manufacturers are doing similar types of things. So Hyundai, for example, on their new Ioniq 6, they've got no side mirrors sticking out because they create a bit of air resistance. So they've got a little tiny bubble on the side that's got a camera in it, and then on the inside you've got a small screen. So you'd still look to the sides for your side view mirrors, but they're not actually a mirror. It's a camera and a screen. So I think we'll see more and more of this. I actually remember it was BMW who had a big thing they were doing at one stage. I probably think it's back early 2000, 2003, 2004 with some of their M series. One of the options with one of those was a carbon fibre roof. You paid, I don't know, thousands of dollars for it, and it lowered the centre of gravity by about a centimetre. So they talked about this as a big feature. Get the carbon fibre roof because your centre of gravity will be dropped by a centimetre, better for on the racetrack. Well, with an EV, all that weight's down low. So if you get your carbon fibre roof, you've already got that. So all these differences that we've got now, I just think we're only at the beginning. I think most car manufacturers with EVs are still designing something that looks vaguely like a normal car. Maybe no engine there, maybe a frunk up the front, for example. How far away are we before they just say, hold on.
The homomobile.
The homomobile. We've still been doing things in a traditional way, but we don't need to. We can change the whole ball game now because we don't have these constraints, which are natural constraints that you have with a car. So well done to Polestar. That's something a bit different. Again, other manufacturers are trying a whole range of different things as well, but I'm just waiting for someone to get to that point where they just say, you know what, let's just go back to a completely blank sheet of paper and start again.
By now, you may have heard word on the news coming out of the UK all about how their new public emergency system trial went. At the time of recording this episode, there was still 12 hours to go before the test, so we present this next story to you with an air of anticipation. From the organisers' perspective, hopefully everything went very smoothly. From a distance of 17,000 kilometres away, though, it'd be pretty cool if they blew open the gates of Hades, if you ask me. Matt, public emergency messages broadcast over mobile phones. What in the name of Orson Welles could possibly go wrong?
Well, after the Canberra bushfires here in Australia a few years ago, there was a gentleman who came out with an idea of a little device that looked a bit like a small transistor radio, if people remember what they looked like. And he was going to sell these to everyone, and this was going to be the emergency notification device. You kept batteries in it, and you put it in your glove box and some in your car, sell a screen across the nation, and then any emergency, you automatically got a signal on this. And anyone that heard that idea looked at him and said, why? We've got phones. Everyone's got a phone. Why would you try and sell them another
software
device?
Engineer, mate. That's all you need.
That's right. And so we started looking at how we might do that and how you might time with telcos and make them very geographic specific. In the UK, that's exactly what they're doing at the moment. So as you say, the test hasn't happened as we record this, as at the recording of this, but when people listen to this, that would have already occurred. And so they're trying to get out there and tell people, this is a test. We're going to do a test. Don't be concerned when you see a warning.
Trying to, but they're delivering this to the public that voted for Brexit. So,
ouch.
Yeah. I just, I worry.
Yeah, no, and
I hope the in the simulation that they do, it's all about a Mars attack, you know? And we'll see how many people go into hysteria.
Well, I did see one of the test messages, and it did say, this is a test message. So hopefully that gives it away a little bit, and they're trying to warn people.
But apparently there's a siren that goes with it too. Is that right?
Absolutely right. So even if your phone is on vibrate mode, even if your phone's on silent mode, then it will still make a sound for 10 seconds. So all these people that are sitting around the theatre, in fact, they did change the time because the original time they were going to do it was the same time as an FA Cup semi-final match. Oh. And you can imagine 80,000 people in a stadium and all of a sudden all their phones
go.
So they thought that's not such a good idea.
Yeah, right.
So it's quite clever to actually get to the point where you are making a phone make a sound when it's in silent mode or vibrate mode, for example. And so that all makes sense. But the whole idea of this test is to just make sure the system works. But then when they can start using it, you'll be able to do this in a very geographic specific area. So, for example, if Mary loses her child in a particular area in London, for example, and alerts the police, they can just put out an alert to the the cell towers that are just near that area.
Yeah,
so
okay.
not across all of England where you might think, well, really, is that child being transported 4 hours away in the last 10 minutes? Probably not. So go where the problems are. Or if you did have a flood or a bushfire, then people in the way of that could be alerted, and the rest of England could be, okay, everything's fine. I don't need to see an emergency message. And it also does it via your location, not via where you might be registered as your home. So if you're on holiday in the top end of England and there happens to be a flood or a bushfire or whatever, you'll still get the alert even though that's not your normal home. So that's an interesting piece of the puzzle as well, if you like. So that's kind of interesting in terms of the way they're doing that. So they're doing it via a cell tower. Obviously, all the telcos have got to be on board with that, which they are, and it makes so much sense. And we actually had an incident a few years ago, it was a very scary incident, where the police knocked on our door and asked if we had a daughter named Georgie. And we've kind of, your heart jumps in your throat. Yes, we have. She was out doing some exercise, and how she had a phone position, held down the button on the phone to make an emergency call. And so without her knowing about it, it's in her pocket, it's making an emergency call.
Yeah, right.
She's continuing on at the gym, whatever she was doing. But they didn't actually go to the location of where the emergency call came from.
It came home.
It came to her house because it was still, her phone number was still registered to the home address, which I thought was a little bit clumsy, because if there was a problem, we said, yeah, great, we've got a problem. Oh no, our daughter's in trouble 400 kilometres away, not right here where you just come and knocked on our door. So there's room for it to be improved, and obviously the UK is testing all of this, but it just makes so much sense. Using your mobile phone to be alerted about any kind of emergency is brilliant. So let's hope the test goes well. Let's hope across the world, and there are similar systems across the world in different countries, let's hope it all works out so well, and let's hope no hackers get onto it and start sending messages to everyone.
Yeah, some 14-year-old kid playing games with people. Now for a story that will prod the body conscious right in the midriff. A new smart scale has hit the market with a bunch of new features, and some of these features are about tracking your measurements while also accounting for a bit of sensitivity to people's mental well-being. Matt, does this model give warm hugs when you step off as well?
Almost. It's very close to that, as close as it can possibly get. Now, I do actually like some of the systems that are out there now where you'll get scales that do things like check your BMI, check your percentage of body fat, a whole range of bits of information. We do talk about health products a lot here. And it all feeds that through to your phone so you can track it with an app and maybe tie it in with some sort of weight watching app that's checking how much food you're eating. So all sorts of things tie together. But apparently it's a bit of a demotivator for people when they step on the scales and they look down and the number is not the number they'd like to see, so they get a bit frustrated and annoyed, and then that blows their day.
There's a whole branch of psychology that goes into this, stepping onto the bathroom scales.
Exactly right. Now, I thought it would have been good-ish if you stepped on the scales and went, damn, I'm not where I want to be. Right, I won't go and eat those chocolates today or that chocolate cake or whatever, and I'll go and do some more exercise. But apparently, depending how far the number is away from where you want it to be, then it can work in reverse. So if you get on and it's a bit higher, you might go and do some exercise. If it's too much higher, you go, damn it, nothing's working. Where's that chocolate cake?
Up,
I'll go and gorge on it.
Oh, yeah.
So these scales, get ready for it, these scales do not show you your weight. And you kind of think, well, that's the primary purpose of them. You can add a whole bunch of features in, but the primary purpose surely is to show your weight. No, it's called eyes closed mode. So you step on the scales, it doesn't show your weight. It still feeds your weight through to an app, so you can still go and look it up. But instead of showing you your weight, it shows you motivational messages. It shows you information to try and inspire you to go and keep doing good. So not quite a warm hug, but a metaphoric warm hug, maybe.
Yeah, perhaps,
a metaphoric G-up and says, get out there and get going. But I personally would want to know, well, that's great you've told me to go out there and run 10Ks or whatever you're going to tell me to do, but is it having an effect? I'd really be interested in that. But you can look at that. You can go and look at your phone and look at that. But this is very strange. I just imagine sitting around the boardroom.
I'm just trying to visualise that. Now, instead of looking at a number there in the morning, you then go to the graph and look at how your graph's looking, I guess.
Maybe, yeah. But can you imagine pitching this, sitting around the boardroom? Now, I've got this idea. The next set of scales we produce, let's have no weight on them. And they throw cups of coffee at the guy and say, what are you doing in the boardroom? How did you get in here even? So someone thought it was a good idea. Yeah, I'm not convinced, but they've probably put more
I wonder if
research
you
into
can
it than I
get
have.
different versions of it. One that talks to someone like they're a footy player, and one that talks to someone like, they're
If you like cussing, for example, then someone that swears at you and
you idiot, what are you doing?
that's right, really gives it to you.
Get out there and run laps.
You might have different options there. Who knows? That sounds like a better idea than not showing the weight, in my opinion.
Every sport has its elite level of competition, and all are tough in their own way, but very few could be said to be as grueling as the Tour de France. I hope, for argument's sake, that's a given, folks. So everything bar nothing about the hardware, the clothes, the cleats, and a cyclist's health and fitness all need to be engineered and fine-tuned to a nanoscopic degree on the Tour. Calorie intake is a big thing, and AI is being employed by teams to calculate a competitor's nutrition plan precisely. Matt, this is what engineers do with F1 racing cars. The line between man and machine is smudged a little bit more here, with the Tour de France business being what it is.
The only thing surprising to me about this story is that they haven't done it sooner. Every edge in some of the Tour de France. And when you're cycling over that many days, over that many kilometres, a couple hundred kilometres a day, over the best part of a month, then just any little tiny advantage would be enough. They design helmets to have 0.1% less drag than some other helmet.
It's crazy. Well, and every team's got their own nutritionist or team of nutritionists and chefs and all that sort of stuff preparing all the food. This goes another level on top of that.
It does, and I love watching some of the coverage there where you do see the kitchen, the mobile kitchen that goes around with them. As you say, you've got your own chefs and your own nutritionists and the team of people cooking these up, because 25,000 kilojoules a day they're burning up while they're racing.
That's
now,
phenomenal.
if you can replace that correctly, that makes sense. So they've had all these experts, they've had these team of people that have been basically working out how much you're chewing up and then how much you've got to get through and all the rest of it. And that's been working pretty well for them. Obviously, people have been able to survive the whole tour and still look like they're fit and healthy at the end. But they started getting into more detail where they started tracking the exact details, because they've got all these details of their heart rate, and exactly what the body's doing.
Monitored to an inch of its life, yeah?
Exactly right. And so they know all that. They know what they're burning up and they know what food they've been given before the race and then during the race and then after the race. So they then got good old AI, our old friend AI, onto the program and said, work out with a bit more precision how all of these things could go together so that you're replacing the food that they're burning up, the energy they're burning up through the day, with food that's going to be best to be turned into energy, for example. Let's see how you go with a model with all of that. Now, they did some comparisons where they said, here's what we would have done in the past, here's how we would have taken those normal human inputs and worked at all those calculations and then do all those, and they give them a score of 100 at the end of a race, or score of 1 if it was perfect. And so they found the coaches and the nutritionists and the chefs and everyone else got up to a maximum of about 0.55. So in general terms, they were getting it right a bit more than half of the time. They then got AI to analyse the same information after a race, and with AI, they believe they could get up to 0.82 in terms of replacement of all that energy. So a couple of teams started using it over the last year or so, and some people were winning races, winning longer races, not the Tour in this case, but winning longer races with the ones where they had this improved nutrition through AI. So this year, lots of the teams using AI will be basically feeding nutrition differently to their cyclists. So I expect this year we'll see not only improved performance overall of all the athletes, but the ones that have adopted this the best will probably be the ones that have got those riders that are up near the very top. It's not taking drugs. It's not cheating in any way. It's not like in some of the early Tour de France that some cyclists got on the train and took a bit of a jump forward in the train.
That's loose, isn't it?
It is a bit loose, that's right. So it's not doing any of those things. It's not doing blood doping, etc. It's just using intelligent information that you've got there and analysing it to the nth degree. Can we then use that in our lives? Sure thing. It's probably a bit harder to get Joe Blow average, who can't even see what weight he is when he stands on the scales, to see what food he might need and stick to it. But if someone was really strict on their diet, absolutely they could use this. But I see this probably more for elite athletes at this stage, more so than average you and me.
Here's a story that's going to annoy the skeptics among us. We have taken one small step closer to settling on Mars with the development of NASA's Martian habitat simulation. 4 lucky crew members will lock themselves away for 12 months in a simulated Martian station to nut out the challenges of isolation and confinement, likely to meet the first pioneers for the planet. Matt, long-term isolation and confinement sounds tempting. Let's hope none of them snore.
I think snoring would actually be the least of your troubles. I'm not sure I'd
What about
be
the
up
guy
for
with
this.
the BO that's just like...
And what do you do?
doesn't
Do you
shower?
say, can you get out of the place? No. They've got 4 people in a habitat for a year. Now, again, I'm not sure I'd be up for that. It's one thing if you're on Mars, so you've got no choice. They put you in a little habitat there and you kind of can't spit the name and leave because outside is Mars. So you have to stay there together. This is a simulation to see how people will react. Now, they're monitoring...
They did something like this in the late 80s or the 90s, didn't they? Called the Biodome?
Yeah,
But they
you're
had
right.
like a big garden and everything sort of set up. It was as if they had already colonised Mars and we were living on Mars and everything was just sort of contained within that area.
Yeah.
This is just, sorry guys, boring old dusty Mars.
Well, it is, but they've got some of those things there as well because they're trying to see whether or not people could survive. Now, they're going to monitor a whole range of things about their health, but they're also going to monitor very closely their mental state.
Yeah,
now,
that's a big
where I
one.
think, that's exactly right. That's where I think they would have much more of a challenge than the physical. The physical, I think, would be with some careful attention to detail. I think they could probably handle that one okay. Make sure you're doing some exercise. Here's your food. Make sure you're getting a whole range of different types of food. Grow some various plants, etc. in there. But mentally, 4 of you, like something happens with you and I and we just have a little bit of a blue one day, what do? You got to keep seeing each other.
Well, and that's it. And your communication, I think they're also simulating something with the communication as well, with back to Earth.
Correct.
You can't just have a chat with the guy in the control room because you've got to allow for the delay.
Yeah. And the thing I think that'd be really tough is Aunt Mary dies. Oh, I loved Aunt Mary.
Yeah.
Her funeral's on next week. Oh, I've got to pretend I'm on Mars. I can't just walk out of the little dome and go to Aunt Mary's funeral. Maybe they could send a video to me
Yeah,
with
your
the
wife
appropriate
gets
delay.
sick or something like that, and you just
Anything. Yeah.
oh,
So
gee whiz.
it does sound tough, doesn't it? So as I say, I wouldn't be up for it because it would be too tempting. If something happened in the outside world, you just want to say, yeah, look, it seemed like a good idea, but I'm just
outta
going to
here.
walk out the door. Sorry,
Yeah.
guys. I've had enough. Or I've had enough of you. I don't want to,
Yeah, that's right.
don't want to hang around here anymore. This is too
Well,
much.
look, they actually did something that was the Russian Space Agency in team with the European Space Agency and the Chinese Space Agency back in 2011, I think it was. They actually came out. There was 7 astronauts that were locked away for 18 months in this thing that was the size of a couple of shipping containers. They learned a couple of big lessons out of that too. Yeah. Did you know anything about that?
No, I haven't actually seen that one. So it really is about learning some of these things before
Yeah.
they get to Mars and then find out one day that they've spent all this time sending people to Mars and they've all killed each other.
Well, they said that everyone had their quiet corner, and if they were sitting in that quiet corner, no one was to speak to them, no one was to have anything to do with them.
Yep.
You just let them get over their little mood, and when they re-emerged from that quiet corner, their safe space, that was when you.
Well, I think I'd be the opposite. I think there'd be too much quiet. If I've only got, in this case, 4 people in total, so 3 other people to talk to, I'd be wanting to talk to someone because I'd be going a bit stir crazy that I don't want a quiet corner. I want to be able to communicate and talk to people.
They'd have to send you a whole TV series of Yellowstone or whatever. And,
That's right.
Yeah.
And again, that communication back there, adding the delay in there as if you were on Mars and you want to talk to someone.
well, you can't have a conversation. You've got to basically make a video message, send that off, and then wait for them to send you back a video message because we just can't have to and fro.
Well, you can't have normal to and fro, can you, with that
No.
such a delay? So it's going to be interesting, but I'm going to be really fascinated to see how they go, how they emerge from this, and what they learn, in particular on the psychology side. I think that'll be the fascinating part of it, to see how they survive that, to then basically get to the stage where we set up for Mars.
Yeah, amazing things.
So you're not putting your hand up?
No, I didn't. No, not this time. It'll be, as I say, as isolation and confinement. That's a way of torture, isn't it?
It does sound like it, doesn't it? Absolutely right.
Ameca. A-M-E-C-A. Ameca. It's a name that most people won't recognise yet, but it's soon to become world-renowned. It's a robot just like the ones in the best movies, the ones that look and behave just like humans. Although there are no camera tricks or CGI with this one. Ameca has all the movements and facial expressions that will amaze and frighten the hell out of you, and it'll do it in at least 4 different languages. Matt, the future is here. It's time to start arming ourselves and stashing that canned food. Every man for himself starts today.
And it's got 17 motors in its face. So what more could you
17
need?
motors in your face.
It gives you an idea of how clever our face is to have all these different expressions. But 17 motors in the head of
I
this
was watching a
particular
video
robot.
of it, and it is amazing.
Not bad, is it?
Yeah.
So one of the things that's fascinating, and they often talk about this particular humanoid or humanoid robot to be used for translations. For example, you go along for that important meeting with a head of state, and I've been in meetings with people in countries overseas, in China and Japan, for example, and you've got a translator. And there have been times when I've said a 20-second long sentence, and the translator translates that in 2 seconds.
Yeah.
And you're thinking,
No, I said more than that.
I've said some really
more than
important
that.
stuff in there. How can you get it down to that? Or the opposites happen, where I've said a short sentence of 5 or 6 seconds,
And they've elaborated.
and it's gone for 30 seconds. And I said, did you just say that I've got a funny head and
No,
my
what
ears
you
stick
said
out?
was really offensive, and they had to find a really decent way around it.
It may have been that. And I've also said some really funny things, and after the translation, the audience hasn't laughed. So maybe the translation was lost there as well. So having some type of robot like this, where not only can you hopefully get all the words correct, so they're translating exactly what you said rather than their interpretation of what you said, but giving some meaning to it with their facial expression.
cues. Yeah, well, so much. I mean, emailing. It's so hard to pick tone with emailing,
Yeah.
whether we do so much.
Yep.
That's because you've given them all the words, but you haven't put the facial tone with it. And so that's why, conversation is so much better.
Yeah, that's right. So this is something where I think will be used, first of all, in those sort of translations where you do have a translator for those important meetings. No, let's bring the robot in and we'll understand better the conversation between the two of us. A, the translation will be very quick. B, with those facial expressions, it'll give it just a bit more context and give it a bit more meaning as that translation goes through.
But it'll also make us accept the robot a little bit more because it's got that very, very human feature of the facial expressions.
So I think when you start to get robots around the home, I think absolutely right, you will start to talk to this robot as if it's a person because all the facial expressions seem to make sense.
We get all the cues.
And then people have been saying to talk to it like that. They've been asking what the happiest day of their life is, the saddest day, what emotions can they experience. And of course the robot gives very clinical answers to all of those. I don't experience emotions, for example. But again, it's one of those things that you start to get it. And I find when I type in things to ChatGPT, I always say please and thank you. I think I'm talking to an AI tool. Why am I saying please and thank you? And there's no recognition back to say thank you for saying please and thank you, Matthew. But it is when you start to have this conversation that feels comfortable, you do start to talk as if it's another person.
I was really blown away by how subtle the facial expressions are. It was just, it was so, I say, beautifully human. What's been produced there? They've really thought carefully. Say 17 motors in the face there. All the slight little lip movements and eyebrow movements, the crinkles in the face and whatnot to give away, these subtleties of expression. It's absolutely amazing. Check it out.
Yeah, and think about really good actors when you're watching a good movie, for example. It can just be the raising of one eyebrow or the pursing of the lips that expresses all the emotion.
So subtle.
Yeah, that's right. So
slight little wink of an eye. Yeah.
Fascinating. So anyway, that's what we've got to look forward to. This is the first one, and I can see other companies, other manufacturers, other entrepreneurs going, well, that's the future of robots. Let's go on 17 motors, forget that. We've got 30 in ours, and before you know it, there'll be hundreds of tiny motors across the face to really have every possible expression.
And with one finger on the red button, I'm going to have to end this episode right there, folks. I'm sorry to do it to you, but all good things must come to an end. Thanks for another sterling episode of Tech Talk, Matt.
No problems at all. I'll go out and check out those tractors to make sure they're going in straight lines now.
Absolutely. And I'm off to finish out the living room of my underground bunker. Give it that warm, homely feel for the end of days. When a robot army does come for us, I want to go snuggled up to my wife on a comfy lounge, binge watching old Modern Family episodes with a hot cuppa and a Tim Tam. Come and get me, robot overlords, I dare ya. Thanks for tuning in once again, folks. I'm your host, James Eddy, grateful for your company, whether it be via fibre optics or copper cable or electromagnetic waves bouncing their gleeful way through the atmosphere. You've been listening to Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson. Tell your friends about us and bring them along for next week's episode, which will be a cracking one, I'm sure. Until then, take care. See you when we see you.